The Valerian scout ship drifted silently through the asteroid field, its sensors scanning the primitive probe that had wandered into Imperial space like a lost child searching for home, and the Dark Commander Jothic studied the data streaming. Across their neural interface, with mild curiosity and growing amusement, probe belonged to a species calling themselves humans. Originating from a small blue world and an unremarkable star system on the galaxy's outer rim according to the initial scans, these creatures had only achieved faster-than-light travel 800 years ago, practically yesterday in galactic terms. Another young species reaches for the stars, Jothic's second officer commented, her psychic voice carrying notes of dismissive boredom. Indeed, Jothic replied. Reviewing the biological data with practiced efficiency, the humans were carbon-based bipeds, standing roughly 2 meters tall, with internal skeletons and primitive sensory organs. No psychic abilities registered on any scan. Advanced nanotechnology integrated into their biology. No genetic modifications beyond basic medical interventions, category 5 at best. The second officer concluded negligible threat to the Empire's interests. Athik agreed with the assessment but ordered a deeper investigation anyway. The Valerian Empire had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years by being thorough, if nothing else. 3 scout ships departed to observe human colonies scattered across their small territory of perhaps 50 star systems. What they found confirmed every assumption about humanity's weakness. The humans built their stations and habitats with redundant systems. As if they expected constant failure, their military vessels carried kinetic weapons alongside energy-based armaments, a sure sign of technological primitivism. Most telling of all, their artificial intelligence systems were deliberately limited. Crippled by laws and restrictions born from some ancient fear, they chained their own technology. One scout reported with obvious contempt, "What species hobbles itself so completely?" The reports traveled up the Imperial command structure until they reached the High Council on Villar Prime, the ancient capital world where 12 species had unified under Valerian leadership millennia ago. High Counselor Therum reviewed the data during the morning meditation, their consciousness touching the psychic network that linked all Valerian leadership across the galaxy. These humans occupy resources that could serve the Empire. Therum announced to the assembled council, their reluctance to join our great civilization shows ignorance. It's not wisdom. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would be offered the same choice given to hundreds of species before them: join the Empire as tributary subjects or face pacification through overwhelming force. It had been 3,000 years since any species chose the latter option. The Valerian diplomatic vessel arrived at Earth 3 months after the first probe's detection, emerging from hyperspace with a fleet of 12 warships as escort, a standard show of force meant to encourage cooperation and moral. Helena Voss stood in the command center of Earth's orbital defense station, watching the alien ships position themselves with mathematical precision around humanity's home world. She was 52 years old, gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, with sharp eyes that had seen combat in the Mars Rebellion and the Titan Separatists wore their beautiful. Her tactical officer whispered, admiring the flowing organic curves of Valerian ship design there. A threat assessment. Voss corrected, her voice flat and professional. Count their weapons, map their formation patterns, and find their weaknesses. The Valerian ambassador materialized in Earth's United Coalition Assembly via holographic projection. A being of elegant features and unconscious arrogance that radiated from every gesture. People of Earth, the ambassador began, a translator rendering the psychic communication into human speech. The Valerian Empire extends its benevolent hand to welcome you into galactic civilization. What followed was less a welcome and more an ultimatum. Dressed in diplomatic language, humanity would accept tributary status, providing resources and technology to the Empire while receiving protection and access to advanced knowledge. In return, refuse the Empire would be forced to take regrettable but necessary action to maintain galactic order and stability. You have one standard cycle to provide your answer. The ambassador concluded, the Empire trusts. You will make the wise choice. The hologram vanished, leaving the assembly chamber in stunned silence. President Chen of the United Earth Coalition called an emergency session of military and civilian leadership. The debate raged for hours as diplomats argued for negotiation and generals demanded preparation for war. Admiral Voss sat quietly through most of it, analyzing tactical data on her personal tablet until the president finally asked for her assessment. "We cannot win a conventional war against them," she stated bluntly. "Their technology exceeds ours by centuries, perhaps millennia." Murmurs of despair rippled through the chamber, however. Voss continued, "Standing to face the assembly, I didn't say we cannot win. I said we cannot win a conventional war." She activated the central display, showing historical footage from Earth's long and bloody past. "The Valerians have ruled peacefully for thousands of years." She explained. "They've forgotten what warfare truly means." Images flashed across the screen. Guerrilla fighters in jungles, resistance movements in occupied cities, asymmetric tactics that turn superior firepower into liability rather than advantage. "They expect us to fight like them, fleet against fleet, honor against honor," Voss said, her voice growing harder. "But humanity learned warfare in a different school." She showed the data her analysts had compiled from the brief. Valerian visit. The aliens broadcast their psychic communications without encryption. Their ships followed predictable patrol patterns. Their entire strategic doctrine assumed technological superiority would guarantee victory. "They've made calculations based on what we are." Voss concluded. "They haven't considered what we can become when cornered." The president authorized her to begin contingency planning, though publicly Earth would request time to consider the Valerian offer behind closed doors. However, Admiral Voss assembled a team of humanity's best military minds, historians, who studied asymmetric warfare, engineers, who specialized in reverse engineering, alien technologists, who could profile an enemy that thought in fundamentally different ways. 3 weeks into their preparation, a junior analyst named Kim Park made a discovery that changed everything. "Admiral, I've been reviewing the public database the Valerians provided about their empire," Park reported, excitement barely contained in her voice. "There's something strange about their technological development." She displayed graphs showing the empire's advancement over 12,000 years. The curve rose sharply in the first millennium, then flattened to an almost horizontal line. "They haven't made any significant innovations in 8,000 years." Park explained. "Every advancement they have came from one source, archaeological discoveries from something called the progenitor race." Voss leaned forward, studying the data with growing interest. "They're not inventors," she murmured. "They're archaeologists playing with inherited toys." That night, Voss stood alone in her quarters, looking down at Earth's glowing continents through the viewport somewhere down there. Her daughter was sleeping peacefully, unaware that alien warships orbited overhead with weapons capable of cracking the planet like an egg. The Valerian deadline was approaching soon. Humanity would have to give its answer. Voss pulled up the tactical plans on her secure terminal, reviewing contingencies and fallback positions. Project Prometheus was already underway in the asteroid belt. Hidden shipyards, building vessels that combine human innovation with stolen Valerian principles. Resistant cells were being organized on every colony. Weapons that the civilized galaxy had abandoned millennia ago were being manufactured in secret facilities. "They think we're weak because we're young," Voss whispered to her reflection in the viewport. "They're about to learn that youth means hunger, and hunger means adaptation." She composed her recommendation to the president. Refuse the Valerian ultimatum and prepare for total war. It was a gamble. That could mean extinction for the entire human race. But Admiral Helena Voss had studied enough history to know one undeniable truth. A species that accepts chains has already chosen extinction. Just a slower and more comfortable version. Better to fight and possibly die free than live as subjects to an empire that had forgotten how to truly struggle. The message went out the next morning. Earth's answer to the Valerian Empire was simple and direct. "We respectfully decline your offer. Humanity will remain independent in orbit." The Valerian warships began repositioning, their weapons charging with energy that made the very fabric of space shimmer and distort. Commander Zhathik received the orders from High Command. With a mixture of surprise and resignation, proceed with pacification protocols. The message read: expected resistance, minimal expected duration, 2 standard weeks. Gothik looked at the small blue planet below and felt the first stirrings of doubt. The humans had to know they couldn't win, so why were they choosing to fight? Question would haunt the commander in the months to come. As the Valerian Empire learned the terrible cost of underestimating a species that had clawed its way to the stars through 10,000 years of constant warfare with itself, the galaxy was about to change forever, and it would begin with one simple miscalculation. The colony of New Sarajevo burned under an alien sky as Commander Zhothik surveyed the ruins with growing unease. 3 months had passed since the Valerian Empire began its pacification of human space, and nothing had gone according to plan. The initial bombardment had been textbook. Perfect orbital strikes that neutralized military installations while leaving infrastructure intact for future Imperial use. Standard procedure dictated that the colonists would surrender within days, grateful to be spared further destruction instead. The humans had vanished into the mountains and forests like smoke, dispersing in Wind Sector 12, reports another patrol gone silent. Jethik's tactical officer announced, their psychic voice carrying undertones of frustration. That's the fourth this week. Send a recovery team, Zhothik ordered, already knowing what they would find 2 hours later. The recovery team transmitted images that made even veteran Valerian warriors recoil in disgust. The patrol had been ambushed in a narrow canyon, their vehicles destroyed by primitive explosive devices buried in the road. Bodies had been stripped of weapons and equipment, left in positions clearly meant to demoralize any who found them barbarians. The recovery team leader spat. What civilized species fights this way? Zhothik didn't answer, remembering the intelligence briefings that everyone had dismissed as irrelevant. Humanity's history was soaked in blood from countless wars fought with creativity born of desperation. The Valerian Empire had enjoyed peace for so long that they'd forgotten what true warfare looked like on Earth. Admiral Voss coordinated the resistance from a command center buried 3 kilometers beneath the Rockies. Her staff worked around the clock, managing thousands of guerrilla cells across 50 human worlds. New Sarajevo reports successful harassment of occupation forces. Lieutenant Park announced enemy casualties are mounting faster than they can reinforce. Voss nodded, studying the holographic display showing Valerian fleet positions throughout human space. The aliens had overwhelming firepower, but they were spreading themselves thin, trying to occupy every human colony simultaneously. Classic mistake. Voss thought with grim satisfaction. They assume their technology makes them invincible, so they ignore basic strategic principles. Status on Project Prometheus? She asked. The first squadron is ready for trials, Colonel Hayes reported from the asteroid belt. Shipyards? The hybrid drives work better than we hoped. Voss allowed herself a small smile. Humanities engineers had accomplished in 3 months what should have taken years. Reverse engineering Valerian FTL technology and combining it with human innovations the aliens had never considered. The result was vessels that could outmaneuver anything in the Imperial fleet on New Sarajevo. A young resistance fighter named Marcus Chen prepared his team for another night raid. They'd been farmers before the invasion, growing genetically modified wheat in the colony's vast agricultural zones. Now they were soldiers, using their knowledge of the terrain to bleed the occupiers 1 patrol at a time. Remember? Marcus whispered to his squad as they applied camouflage paint in patterns that confused Valerian thermal sensors. They rely on their scanners more than their eyes. Make them blind, and they're just targets. The raid went perfectly. Marcus's team struck a supply convoy, destroyed 3 transport vehicles, and vanished back into the forest before Valerian reinforcements could arrive. They lost no one. While the aliens suffered 15 casualties, it was a small victory in a vast war. But small victories were adding up across every occupied world. Commander Zhothik requested additional forces from High Command and received a response that bordered on rebuke. Pacification should be complete by now. High Counselor Therum communicated through the psychic network, your inability to subdue primitives reflects poorly on Valerian military competence. Zhothik wanted to explain that these weren't ordinary primitives, that the humans fought with a ferocity and cunning the Empire hadn't faced in millennia. But the psychic network carried only confidence and dismissal from Velar primed. The High Council still believed this was a minor inconvenience, not a genuine threat. That illusion shattered during the Battle of New Sarajevo's orbital space admiral Voss had been waiting for the perfect moment to unveil Project Prometheus, and it arrived when Commander Zhothik ordered an orbital bombardment to flush out resistance fighters hiding in the northern mountains. All ships execute on my mark. Voss transmitted to the hidden human fleet. 20 vessels emerged from behind New Sarajevo's larger moon, their hybrid drives pushing them to speeds that made Valerian sensors register them as sensor ghosts rather than real targets. Hothik S. The tactical officer shouted a warning. But it came too late. The human ships weren't attacking with energy weapons or missiles, they were using kinetic bombardment, accelerating chunks of asteroidal iron to relativistic speeds and launching them like bullets. From the hand of an angry god, 3 Valerian cruisers exploded. Before they could raise shields, 2 more took catastrophic damage and began tumbling out of orbit. Evasive maneuvers, Shotha commanded, their psychic voice sharp with shock. The remaining Valerian ships scattered, but the humans pursued with aggressive tactics that defied every rule of civilized warfare. They rammed damaged vessels to finish them off. They targeted life support systems instead of weapons. They showed no mercy and asked for no quarter when the battle ended 2 hours later. Jothik's fleet had been reduced by 40%. The humans had lost 6 ships, but they'd proven something far more important than victory in a single engagement. Could fight, they could win, and they were willing to pay any price for their freedom. High Command's response arrived within days. Reinforcements from 3 core sectors, elite psychic warriors who could crush resistance through mental domination. Alonza Thick felt a mixture of relief and dread as the reinforcements arrived. Relief because they desperately needed the support, dread because something in their gut whispered that escalation would only make things worse. The psychic warriors deployed to New Sarajevo with absolute confidence, their mental abilities capable of detecting human thoughts from kilometers away and crushing rebellious minds with focused psychic assault. They lasted 2 weeks. The humans had been studying captured Valerian technology obsessively, and their engineers had developed something the Empire thought impossible: psychic dampening fields that generated white noise across the mental frequencies Valerians used for communication and combat. The psychic warriors found themselves blind and deaf, stripped of the abilities that made them electroresistance fighters, killed them with bullets and blades, primitive weapons that worked just fine when the playing field was leveled. But worse than the deaths was what the humans did next. They captured 3 psychic warriors alive and used Valerian medical technologists stolen and reverse-engineered to keep them in suspended animation. Then they broadcast a message to every Valerian ship in human space, transmitted on frequencies that would reach High Command on Vilar. Prime Admiral Voss appeared on the transmission. Standing in front of the captured warriors, "You came to our worlds expecting easy conquest," she said, her voice calm and cold. "You believed your technology and psychic powers made you superior? You were wrong." She gestured to the prisoners behind her. "These warriors will be treated according to the laws of war, something you apparently forgot existed. They will be fed, sheltered, and returned when this conflict ends. But understand this clearly. We know how to defeat your advantages. We know how to fight and win. Leave our territory now while you still can." The transmission ended, and Commander Jothik sat in stunned silence as the implications washed over them. Humans weren't just fighting, they were learning, adapting, evolving their tactics faster than the Empire could. Counter 3 psychic warriors captured alive was a statement more powerful than destroying 100 ships. It said that humanity understood Valerian psychology well enough to know that proof of capability would shake the Empire more than simple destruction. That night, Jothik did something no Valerian commander had done in 3,000 years. They opened a private communication channel to Admiral Voss, broadcasting on frequencies they'd learned the humans monitored. "This is Commander Jothik of the Imperial Fleet," they transmitted. "I request a meeting under flag of truce to discuss terms." The response came within the Your request is acknowledged," Voss replied. "However, we will not discuss surrender if you wish to negotiate your withdrawal from our space." "I will listen." Jothik met with their senior officers, their psychic presences mingling in the shared mental space. "High Command will never approve withdrawal." The tactical officer insisted. "We are Valerian. We do not retreat from primitives." "These are not primitives," Jothik said quietly. "They are survivors of a crucible we cannot imagine. Every war they fought among themselves taught them lessons we never needed to learn. And now they're teaching us." The meeting with Admiral Voss took place on a neutral moon, Both commanders, arriving with minimal escort, Sothik studied the human admiral carefully, seeing weathered features that spoke of long service and eyes that held no hatred. "Only cold determination. You cannot win this war," Jathek said bluntly. "Our empire spans 12,000 worlds you control." 50 Voss smiled. A predator's expression that made Jathek's skin crawl despite themselves. "We don't need to conquer your empire," she replied. Commander Jathek stood in the interrogation room aboard the human flagship Indomitable. Their hands bound with restraints they could have broken easily, but chose not to. Admiral Voss sat across the table, flanked by 2 guards whose weapons never wavered from the Valerian center mass. "You claim to have critical intelligence," Voss said, her voice neutral. "Convince me this isn't a trick." Jathek took a deep breath and transmitted the classified orders via a data chip. Watching as Voss's expression hardened while reading about Protocol 7, "They're going to sterilize every human world." Jathek explained, "Complete planetary bombardment using weapons that will render your planets uninhabitable for 10,000 years. Why are you telling me this?" Voss demanded. "You're betraying your own people." "I'm trying to save them," Jathek replied quietly. "The High Council has become so arrogant that they cannot see the truth. You cannot be defeated through conventional means. And attempting genocide will only unite your species in ways that will eventually destroy the Empire itself." Voss studied the alien commander for long moments, searching for deception and finding only weary conviction. "What do you want in return for this information?" "Help me stop this madness." Jathek said, "The Empire I serve has forgotten what it means to respect other species if Protocol 7 succeeds. The Empire will have crossed a line it can never uncross, but if humanity survives and proves we can coexist, perhaps there's hope for reform." Admiral Voss made a decision that her superiors would question for months afterward. She chose to trust the defector within hours. Jathek was providing detailed intelligence about Valerian fleet deployments, weapons capabilities, and most importantly, the location of the dreadnoughts being prepared to execute Protocol 7. "They're gathering at the Kepler Nebula," Jathek explained, highlighting a region of space filled with ionized gas and stellar debris. "The fleet will jump from there to your core worlds in one coordinated strike." "How many ships?" Colonel Hayes asked. 73 capital vessels, Jathek replied, "each carrying enough firepower to crack a planet." The room fell silent as the humans absorbed the scale of the threat facing them. "We have 42 combat-ready vessels in the Prometheus fleet," Voss said finally, "less than a third of their strength in a conventional battle." "We'd be annihilated," she smiled grimly. "Good thing we don't fight conventional battles over the next 3 weeks." Admiral Voss planned the most audacious military operation in human history. The Battle of Kepler Nebula would either save humanity or doom it to extinction. Every available ship was retrofitted with technology adapted from Jathek's intelligence. New shield harmonics that could withstand Valerian energy weapons longer, improved targeting systems that compensated for the nebula's interference, and weapons that the civilized galaxy had abandoned as too dangerous or unethical. "You're using nuclear-shaped charges?" Jathek asked in horror, reviewing the human weapon. Loadout's radiation weapons were banned by the Galactic Concordat. 5,000 years ago, we never signed your Concordat. Voss replied coldly, "And we'll use whatever tools we need to survive." The human fleet departed for Kepler Nebula under strict radio silence, their hybrid drives allowing them to approach without alerting Valerian long-range sensors. They arrived to find the enemy fleet assembled exactly where Jathek had predicted. 73 massive dreadnoughts arranged in a parade formation that spoke of overwhelming confidence. "They're not even screening for attackers," Lieutenant Park observed with disbelief. "They don't believe anyone would dare strike them here. Their mistake." Voss said, "All ships execute Operation Earthbreaker." The human fleet split into 3 groups, each approaching the Valerian formation from different vectors. They stayed within the densest parts of the nebula where radiation interference made sensor detection nearly impossible. The Valerian fleet's first warning came when nuclear explosions began detonating throughout their formation. The humans weren't trying to destroy the dreadnoughts with the nuclear devices, they were using them to create electromagnetic pulses that disrupted Valerian shields and targeting systems. In the chaos that followed, the human ships emerged from the nebula like predators from tall grass. They targeted command ships first, Using kinetic weapons that punched through weakened shields, they deployed swarms of autonomous drones that kamikazed into engine clusters. They fought with brutal efficiency that prioritized damage over honor. The Valerian fleet tried to respond, but their commanders were trained for set-piece battles, where both sides maneuvered for advantage before engaging. Humans gave them no time to adapt. Voss commanded the Indomitable personally, her ship leading a thrust directly at the Valerian flagship. All batteries concentrated fire on that dreadnought's bridge section.
She ordered missiles and railgun slugs hammered the massive vessel, overwhelming its defensive systems through sheer volume of fire. Then
Flagship's bridge exploded in a cascade of atmosphere and debris without its commander. The ship began to drift. Its automated systems, unable to compensate for battle damage, target the next command ship, Voss commanded, her voice emotionless around her. The battle raged with an intensity the Valerian Empire hadn't experienced in. Millennia ships exploded in brilliant flashes, debris fields expanded like deadly flowers, and through it all, the human fleet kept pressing, kept attacking, kept refusing to break commander. Jothik watched from the Indomitable's observation deck. Their psychic senses overwhelmed by the death and destruction, they reached out through the psychic network, feeling Valerian minds winking out like extinguished candles as ships died. "This is what you forced us to become," Admiral Voss said quietly, standing beside the traumatized alien. "We didn't want this war, but now that you've started it, we'll finish it." The battle lasted 6 hours when it ended. 41 Valerian dreadnoughts had been destroyed or disabled. The remaining 32 retreated in disorder. Their commanders, too shocked to mount an effective counterattack. Humanity had lost 19 ships, but they'd accomplished something. The galaxy thought impossible. They'd broken a Valerian fleet in open combat. News of the battle spread through the Empire like wildfire, carried by psychic networks that couldn't contain such shocking information. 3 subject species, the Krell, Etheria, and the Zenthionza, immediately began quiet rebellions. Inspired by humanity's defiance and Viller Prime, High Counselor Therum convened an emergency session, their psychic presence radiating fury and disbelief. "How did primitives destroy half our dreadnought fleet?" They demanded. "The humans are not primitives." One counselor dared to respond. "Our intelligence was catastrophically wrong. Then we will commit our entire fleet." Thurum declared, "Every ship, every warrior, every weapon the Empire possesses, we will erase humanity from existence." But other voices in the council were beginning to question that approach. The Empire had never faced a sustained military challenge, and the thought of committing their full strength against an enemy that fought with such unconventional tactics was terrifying. "What if we lose?" A junior counselor whispered. "The Valerian Empire does not lose." Threm stated with absolute conviction, "Defeat is impossible back in human space." Admiral Voss addressed the United Earth Coalition via holographic transmission. "We've proven we can fight and win," she said, "but this war is far from over. The Empire will escalate, and we must be ready." She outlined Operation Prometheus Phase 2, massive expansion of the hybrid fleet combined with accelerated recruitment and training. Every human colony was mobilizing, building ships in hidden asteroid facilities and training soldiers in tactics that made Valerian commanders lose sleep. The war had reached a turning point. Humanity was no longer on the defensive. Within 2 months of the Kepler Nebula battle, human raiding fleets began striking Valerian logistics bases deep in Imperial territory. They didn't try to hold captured positions. They destroyed supplies, stole technology, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. The psychological impact was devastating. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Valerian Empire felt vulnerable. Esthik, now officially defected and serving as an advisor to human forces, provided crucial intelligence that made each raid more effective. "The Empire's greatest weakness is its own success," Shattuck explained during a strategy session. "They've been unchallenged for so long that they've become complacent. Their supply chains are inefficient because no one ever attacks them. Their commanders follow doctrine blindly because doctrine has always worked before. Show me their supply routes." Voss commanded. Sathik highlighted dozens of shipping lanes crisscrossing the galaxy, all funneling resources to Viller Prime and other core worlds. Here and here, Voss said, marking 3 critical junctions. "If we sever these routes, We cut off 20% of their fleet's fuel and ammunition. The raids were executed with precision. Human ships appearing from hyperspace, destroying convoys, and jumping away before Valerian defenders could respond. The successful attack eroded Imperial confidence a little more on Valer Prime. The High Council watched their carefully ordered galaxy descending into chaos. Subject species were openly rebelling, human fleets raided with impunity, and worst of all, the invincible Valerian military was proving disturbingly vincible. We must negotiate. The Valerian armada assembled at Valer Prime was the largest military force the galaxy had seen in 10,000 years. 3,000 warships of every class filled orbital space around the Imperial capital, their hulls gleaming with weapons that could reduce planets to molten slag. High Counselor Thurum stood in the command center of the mega dreadnought, Eternal Glory, surveying their forces with grim satisfaction. This ends now. They declared through the psychic network, we will jump to Earth's system, destroy their homeworld, and scatter the survivors to the void. Humanity will serve as an example to any species that dares defy. Imperial authority, the assembled admirals and commanders shared Thurem's confidence through the network. Their psychic presences radiating certainty of victory. How could they lose with such overwhelming force? What they didn't know was that Admiral Voss had no intention of defending Earth while the Valerian armada prepared its assault. Human engineering teams were completing the most ambitious project in their species. History Commander Jothik stood in the observation lounge of humanity's hidden command station, watching as the final components of Operation Earthbreaker were assembled. You're insane, Jothik whispered. Unable to process what they were seeing, you can't possibly succeed. Admiral Voss joined them at the viewport, her expression unreadable. That's what you said about Kepler Nebula. She replied, how did you even build this without our scouts detecting it? Jothik asked, you taught us that your scouts rely on active scanning. Voss explained. So we built everything in locations where background radiation masks, construction signatures, and we used your own shipping routes to move components disguised as civilian cargo. What Jothik was seeing defied every assumption about human capabilities. Humanity had built an entire fleet of vessels using a revolutionary new design ships that could rebuild themselves mid-combat using swarms of repair nanotests. Phoenix-class warships were smaller than Valerian dreadnoughts, but far more resilient, destroying. One required overwhelming its nanite reserves, which meant sustained firepower that few enemy ships could maintain. While under attack themselves, you've had nanite technology for less than a year. Jothik protested. We've had it for 12,000 years and never achieved anything like this level of sophistication. That's because you stopped innovating. Voss said bluntly, you found nanites in progenitor ruins and learned to copy them. We took your copies, understood the underlying principles, and improved on them. That's the difference between archaeologists and engineers. The Valerian defector had no response to that truth. 3 days before the Imperial Armada was scheduled to depart for Earth, Admiral Voss launched Operation Earthbreaker, but instead of positioning forces to defend human space, she did something that shocked every military analyst in the year. Galaxy attacked Valer Prime directly. The human fleet, 150 Phoenix-class warships and 300 support vessels emerged from hyperspace at multiple points around the Valerian homeworld. Didn't target the assembled armada. Instead, they struck at the planet's orbital infrastructure with surgical precision. Shipyards exploded in cascades of debris. Defensive satellites were swept aside by concentrated fire. Communications arrays went dark as human boarding teams captured or destroyed them. High Counselor Thurem screamed orders through the psychic network, trying to coordinate a response, but the humans had planned for that too specialized. Ships began broadcasting psychic white noise on frequencies that disrupted Valerian mental communications. Suddenly, the vaunted psychic network that allowed instantaneous coordination across the fleet became a liability as commanders found themselves isolated and confused. The Eternal Glory managed to get its weapons online and began firing at the nearest human vessels. Admiral Voss watched from her flagship Indomitable as 3 Phoenix-class ships took direct hits from the Dreadnought's main batteries. The human vessels shuddered under the impact. their hulls breaching in multiple locations then. Something impossible happened. The damaged ships began repairing themselves in real time. Nanites swarming over hull breaches and rebuilding destroyed sections even as the battle continued. All ships. Focus fire on the eternal glory. Voss commanded demonstration time. 20 human warships converged on the Valerian flagship, their weapons hammering at its shields with relentless intensity. Eternal Glory's defensive systems were sophisticated, but they were designed for battles where enemy ships were destroyed or retreated when damaged. They couldn't adapt to opponents that absorbed punishment and kept fighting. Flagship shields collapsed under sustained fire. Human boarding teams launched from assault shuttles, cutting their way into the dreadnought's hull with plasma torches inside. Valerian security forces fought desperately, but they'd never trained for repelling. Borders the concept of enemies penetrating your flagship in the middle of a fleet engagement was simply unthinkable in Imperial doctrine. The boarding teams had a specific objective: the command center where High Counselor Therum coordinated the defense. Therum felt the human soldiers approaching through the psychic network, their minds shielded by portable dampening fields, but still detectable by their absence. Guard the command center. Therum ordered, do not let them. The doors exploded inward in a shower of sparks, and metal human soldiers poured through, their weapons firing with practiced precision. Therum tried to use psychic assault, projecting mental force that should have crushed the attackers' minds. Instead, they felt their power deflected by the dampening fields, leaving them as vulnerable as any other mortal beings. A stun grenade detonated, and Therum's world went white when consciousness returned. The High Counselor found themselves restrained and being escorted through their own flagship's corridors. Dead Valerian guards lay everywhere, testimony to the ferocity of human close-quarters combat. Therum was brought before Admiral Voss in what had been the Eternal Glories command center. The human admiral stood amid Valerian technology, looking entirely unimpressed by her surroundings. High Counselor, Voss said formally, you are now a prisoner of the United Earth Coalition. You cannot win. Therum spat, their translator rendering psychic communication into speech. The Empire has 3,000 ships. You have a few hundred primitives playing with stolen technology. Voss smiled coldly. Let me show you something. She activated the command center's displays, showing orbital space around Velar Prime. The Valerian armada was in chaos. Human ships darted between the massive dreadnoughts, too fast and maneuverable for the ponderous Imperial vessels to track effectively. Every time a Valerian ship scored a hit, the damaged human vessel would simply repair itself and continue fighting. Meanwhile, human weapons were targeting specific systems engines, weapons, life support, methodically crippling Imperial ships without destroying them. We're not trying to annihilate your fleet, explained. We're demonstrating that we can defeat it any time we choose. This is your chance to end this war before more lives are wasted. Therum watched in growing horror as their invincible armada was systematically dismantled by an enemy they dismissed as insignificant. What are your terms? The High Counselor asked, the words tasting like poison. Unconditional surrender. Voss replied without hesitation, the Valerian Empire will be dissolved. All subject species will be granted independence. Your military will be reduced to defensive forces only, and you will submit to a war crimes tribunal for ordering the genocide of humanity under Protocol 7. Impossible? Theum roared, the Empire has ruled for 12,000 years. You cannot simply erase that legacy. Watch us. Voss said. She broadcast a message to every ship in the Valerian fleet, transmitted on all frequencies, including the psychic network warriors of the Valerian Empire. This is Admiral Helena Voss of the United Earth Coalition. Your High Counselor is in our custody. Your flagship is captured. Your armada is defeated. We offer you one chance to survive. Stand down your weapons and await further instructions. Any ship that continues to fight will be destroyed. You have 30 minutes to comply. The response was immediate and devastating. To Imperial morale, ship after ship powered down their weapons, their commanders realizing that continuing to fight would accomplish nothing except their own destruction. A few diehards tried to rally resistance, but they were quickly overwhelmed by human forces that had been waiting for exactly that response within 2 hours. The entire Valerian armada had surrendered. The galaxy's most powerful military force had been defeated not through superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but through tactics, innovation, and the sheer stubborn refusal of humanity to accept subjugation on Earth. Celebrations erupted as news of the victory spread. People poured into streets, crying and laughing, and embracing strangers stayed. Serveted, yet one but in her command center aboard the captured Eternal Glory. Admiral Voss felt no joy. She looked at High Counselor Threm, seeing not a monster, but a relic of a bygone era hood. Genuinely believed in the Empire's right too. Rule you could have avoided all of. This, she said quietly, if you'd approached us as equals instead of inferiors. We might have joined your empire willingly. We're not unreasonable people. We just refuse to be slaves. Thrym had no answer. 6 months after the Battle of Velor Prime, Admiral Helena Voss stood in the Grand Assembly Hall that had once housed the Valerian High Council. The chamber had been repurposed for a very different gathering, the signing of the Treaty of Terra, which would formally establish the Galactic Confederacy and dissolve the Valerian Empire forever. Forever representatives from 43 species filled the hall, each wearing the traditional garments of their homeworld shamans. In formal military dress stood alongside Valerians in flowing robes, Krell in crystalline armor, Mathari in atmospheric suits, and dozens of other beings who'd spent millennia under Imperial Rule Commander Jothik, now serving as the Valerian representative, approached the signing podium with visible emotion there. People had lost an empire but gained something perhaps more valuable, the respect of their former subjects earned through genuine cooperation. Rather than enforced submission, the Valerian delegation acknowledges our grave errors. Jothik announced to the assembly, we believed our long dominance gave us the right to rule others. We were wrong. Humanity taught us that true strength lies not in forcing compliance, but in inspiring cooperation. We commit ourselves to this new path. However difficult it may be, the hall erupted in cautious applause. Trust would take time to rebuild. But this was a start. Admiral Voss approached the podium next, her gray hair now showing more silver, but her eyes as sharp as ever. The United Earth Coalition does not stand here as conquerors, she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the massive chamber. We fought for our survival and won, but victory in war is meaningless if we simply replace one empire with another. The Galactic Confederacy will be built on principles that humanity holds sacred: self-determination, mutual respect, and the fundamental right of every sapient being to choose their own destiny. She paused. Looking out at the assembled delegates, we will share the progenitor technology freely. We will establish councils where every species has an equal voice. And we will never forget the cost of the war that brought us here. The treaty was signed by all 43 founding species. Over the course of 6 hours, each representative adding their mark to the historic document. When the last signature was recorded, the chamber fell silent. Then someone began to applaud a Mathari delegate whose people had suffered under Valerian rule for 8,000 years. Others joined in until the entire hall thundered with the sound of beings celebrating the end of an era and the beginning of something new. President Cheneverth stood and raised a glass to a free galaxy. They proclaimed, may we prove worthy of the sacrifices that made this possible. To a free galaxy, the assembly echoed in the weeks that followed. The hard work of galactic reorganization began in earnest. The Valerian military was reduced from 3,000 ships to 300. Enough for legitimate defense, but not enough to threaten any one. Former imperial worlds were granted independence. Though many chose to remain in voluntary association with the new confederacy, the progenitor archives on Velor Prime were open to researchers from all species, sparking a renaissance of technological innovation that would transform galactic civilization. Admiral Voss spent much of her time helping to establish the Interspecies Military Academy, a training facility where soldiers from different worlds could learn to work together. The Academy's motto, suggested by Voss herself, was simple: strength through unity, peace through understanding. On the day the Academy opened its doors, Voss addressed the first class of cadets humans. Valerians, Krell, Mathari, and a dozen other species all standing together, you represent something unprecedented. In galactic history, she told them, a military force dedicated not to conquest, but to collective defense. Learn from each other, respect your differences, and remember that the greatest victories are the wars we prevent through diplomacy and mutual understanding. Among the cadets was Marcus Chen, the former farmer from New Sarajevo who'd become a resistance fighter and then a soldier. He stood beside a young Valerian named Krethas, whose sibling had died in the Battle of Kepler Nebula 2, former enemies. Now classmates and future comrades, it was a small moment, but it represented the future Voss had fought too. Create the trial of High Counselor Thurium took place 3 months after the treaty. Signing the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of the planned genocide under Protocol 7, along with testimony from dozens of species about imperial abuses over the millennia. Theorem S. Defense argued that the High Counselor had been acting according to imperial law and tradition, believing genuinely in the Empire's right to rule. Tribunal deliberated for 2 weeks before reaching a verdict guilty of crimes against sapient life. Sentence was exiled to a remote world, where Tharum would live under supervision, but in comfort. With access to books and communication with their family, Admiral Voss had testified during the trial, not to demand harsh punishment, but to explain the principle guiding the prosecution: justice must be served. She'd said, but vengeance serves no one. High Counselor Thurem committed terrible acts, but those acts were enabled by a system that existed for thousands of years before they took power. We dismantle that system and hold individuals accountable for their choices. That's how we move forward. Therum spent their exile writing extensively about the fall of the Empire, producing documents that would become essential reading for political scientists, studying the dangers of unchecked power. In one particularly poignant passage, the former High Counselor wrote, "We measured ourselves against the galaxy and found no equals, so we assumed we had no betters. Humanity taught us that strength comes in forms we never anticipated. Their physical fragility hid mental resilience, their technological primitiveness masked adaptive genius, their internal conflicts demonstrated their capacity for innovation under pressure. We saw weakness where we should have seen potential. That miscalculation cost us everything. But perhaps it saved the galaxy from our own stagnation." Commander Jothic became the Valerian ambassador to Earth. Working tirelessly to rebuild trust between the two species, they often met with Admiral Voss to discuss the complexities of managing the transition to the Confederacy. "Some of my people still resent humanity," Jothic admitted during one such meeting. "They cannot accept that we were defeated by a species we considered inferior. Time will help," Voss replied. "In success, when they see Valerian scientists working alongside human engineers to advance progenitor technology beyond what your empire ever achieved, attitudes will change when they see Valerian and human ships patrolling together to protect trade routes from pirates. They'll understand cooperation is stronger than domination." She was right. Within a year, joint Valerian-human research teams had made breakthroughs in FTL technology that reduced travel times by 40%. Medical advances shared between species cured diseases that had plagued the galaxy for centuries. And most importantly, the absence of imperial tribute demands allowed former subject species to invest in their own development. Raising living standards across hundreds of worlds, the galaxy was changing. And mostly for the better. Admiral Helena Voss retired from active service 2 years after the war's end. She'd earned it, having spent 40 years in uniform and the last 3 in near constant combat operations. Her retirement ceremony was attended by dignitaries from across the Confederacy, each wanting to honor the woman who'd led humanity through its greatest crisis. Commander Jothic presented her with a Valerian honor rarely given to outsiders, the Star of Unity, recognizing individuals who'd bridged divides between species. "You saved my people by defeating them," Jothic said during the presentation. "That paradox is something we're still processing, but we're grateful nonetheless." Voss accepted the honor graciously, though she deflected much of the praise. "I had help from millions of humans and aliens alike," she said. "Victory belonged to everyone who refused to accept tyranny." In her retirement, Voss took a position as a lecturer at the Interspecies Military Academy, teaching strategy and ethics to cadets who'd never known the galaxy before the Confederacy, her daughter. Now a captain commanding a joint species cruiser, visited when duties allowed, they would walk through the memorial garden Voss had helped design, a place where names of the fallen from all species were recorded in stone. Human, Valerian, Krell, Mathari, and others, all remembered equally, honored for their sacrifice. One evening, as Voss sat in her small home overlooking Earth's Pacific Ocean, she received an unexpected visitor. Marcus Chen, now a major in the Confederacy Defense Force, arrived with a bottle of wine and a question that had been bothering him. "Admiral, do you think we did the right thing?" he asked. "We destroyed an empire that had stood for 12,000 years. What if we made things worse?" Voss poured them both glasses and considered the question carefully. The empire was already dying. She said finally they'd stopped growing, stopped innovating, stopped questioning their own assumptions. If we hadn't challenged them, someone else would have eventually, at least this way. The transition happened with rules and treaties instead of pure chaos. "But we killed so many people," Marcus protested.